Hello, everybody, and happy new comic book day. It has been such a long time since I have said that. Welcome to the launching episode of the official That's Comical channel. I, of course, am always Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and words cannot describe, even though I will constantly be rambling, how excited I am to start this brand new journey talking about comic books and everything that is in between in regards to the ways that the written word meets the illustrated artwork. And of course, I have the That's Comical team with me for this amazing launching episode. So of course, we have to go around the room and introduce everybody. We've got my true partner in crime who goes comic hunting with me whenever we can. Andy's back. Andy, it's been a while. It's great to have you back.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here.
And of course, we've got the manga queen herself, Shay from Shay Geeks Out. Shay, welcome back.
Hi, happy to be here.
The lady of the menagerie, April from April Sarah. April, how are you?
I am good. I'm excited. I think I'm going to learn a few things today.
I really hope that everybody does and just it teaches everybody as well. And of course, I've said this once before, but I love saying it so much, so I'm going to say it again. My almost twin sister from another mister, Cammie over at Cammie's Corner. How are you, Cammie?
Nice to be here. Nice to see everyone again.
So I have to give the credit here to the ladies in the room because it was really them who came to me one day and said, this is a great idea, Steve, but this could be so much better if we actually make this whole concept a channel so we can add more ideas and, more importantly, more voices to a community in YouTube that is expanding ever more by the day. I have to say that if you are an anime fan, a manga fan, a Marvel movie fan, a DC movie fan, a comic book reader, a Bruce Timm cartoon watcher, you have no idea how this new community of comic books and manga is expanding. And so many people are sharing so many amazing ideas, but more importantly, they're sharing their passion for comic books and manga, and it is absolutely amazing. Even the booktube community is really transitioning to a more comic/graphic novel and manga-based programming, and that's not a bad thing at all. But also, I have to thank Cammie because she is the one that came up with the idea for this official pilot launch to talk about something that we all can bring something very interesting to the table as well as learn from each other, and that is our collections. Collecting, to me personally, is a very wonderful thing. I never understood why collecting was something that was in my blood, especially because of the fact that nobody in my family did what I did. But it wasn't until the last couple of years where, just by watching a show on Netflix called The Toys That Made Us, and there was a sociologist that was brought to this documentary, and he explained why people collect. And it's the fact that it is a physical extension of your personality that you are trying to get out there and share. So when you bring somebody down to where your collection is and you just are so excited and elated to say, let me show you something amazing, it is you trying to share yourself with others and show them why you love what you have on your bookshelves or your storage shelves or your gigantic walk-in closet where everything is on display. I personally think that it is a wonderful thing. So let's begin. What was it that got you to start collecting, and can you even remember what the first things were that you did collect?
Okay, so me first. No pressure, no pressure. So me, I mean, I've dabbled in collecting in the manga and the comic, and I've just recently really vamped up on it. But I was, oh goodness, maybe 11 or 12. I can't quite remember, but this is the era of Sailor Moon. And I really, really got into the anime. And then I found out that it was a comic or a manga. I didn't know what any of that meant. And I somehow convinced my grandmother, who to this day still reminds me of the fact that I needed to go to this comic book store and try and find the original source material for Sailor Moon. And that kind of just like started my journey into expanding how I view my fandoms. So a lot of my collection is usually based off of something that I've come to love in various different forms of media. And it's just kind of expanded that world. And that's kind of how my collection has grown. It's always something that has inspired me into following whatever graphic media that it continues on in.
Now, Cami is someone who I think is a bigger collector than me because she collects all kinds of things from all sorts. So, Cami, I don't think we ever had this conversation. What was it that got you to start collecting? I must know, what was that item or that series of things that decided in your mind, I'm going to start building something here?
Well, putting this together and really having to sit down and think about collecting and collections as a whole, as you mentioned, I am a collector of many things, many fandoms, with no shame, zero shame, I will say. But I had to think back to the past, kind of where it started. And honestly, I think for me, it was very young. I want to say I was probably about 3 or 4. And my first collection was Barbies, because my mom got, me into the idea of, you have a house, you have a car, you have Barbie, you have Ken, and then she has a sister, and then you have pets. And so the idea of kind of meticulously having all these parts and pieces certainly started with Mattel and Barbie. But when I knew that I was an avid collector, I was probably about 12. As you can see behind me, I have a ton of Disney stuff. But we went to Disneyland for the very first time. And my mom said, you need to choose a collection, something to decorate your room with. And at the time, I was just collecting miscellaneous Mickey things because Mickey was the start of it all. And then I found Alice. And I found Alice in a very different way. I didn't discover her in Disneyland, but it just kind of put all the parts and pieces together. And then it kind of exploded. So I would certainly say Alice was my definitive, okay, I'm in this and there's no going back. So yeah, but there's tons of fandoms to talk about in my world.
Jay.
So when it comes to collecting, I would call my first collection Beanie Babies, because I was like an early teen when that kind of became a thing. I still have my Beanie Babies. They're in a box in my garage right now because I have nowhere in my house for them. But it's one of those things where it happened just really randomly. We were at a county fair and rodeo in Idaho where my mom grew up, and there was a Beanie Baby that looked like the cat that I had at home, so I got that. And then my parents are like, did you know there's more of these? I'm like, okay, I want all the cats, because I was obsessed with cats. So it started with just the cats, and I kept finding cuter ones and cuter ones and cuter ones, and I still have my most expensive one to date, which is a white dragon with like iridescent wings.
Magic. I have it too.
And it's still like in a box. I actually have that one in my living room, but just because it's so pretty. When it comes to like comics and manga, I got into that very organically. I started watching anime when I met my husband, and that's been 7.5 years now. God, that feels weird to say. But anyways, so I started watching anime, and then as I was reading and on BookTube, I thought, I've always been curious about manga. Like, I should find something that I know and see if I like the format. So I picked up the first volume of Fairy Tail because I had enjoyed the anime. So I'm like, that's a familiar story. I can test the format with that. And I jumped down that rabbit hole really hard. And I'm still down there living my best life to this day.
Andy, I know a little bit about your story, but I'm sure there are other people who have not. So I got to hear.
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer for how I started collecting is through my dad, because all of like nerd culture in my life, I can kind of draw back to there. So much of my love of comics comes from him. My love of movies, all sorts of stuff goes back to my dad. The strange thing is, I mean, obviously there'll be evidence to the contrary that I have to share tonight, but like I often don't consider myself a collector. I have a lot of fandoms and I'm all into various parts of quote unquote nerd culture. But I don't feel that there's a lot of things that I need to like complete a set, like that kind of collecting mentality. That having been said, I do kind of consider, and I think widely people would, the things that I own kind of my personal collection. So while I don't have as much of a drive to complete a series, complete a set, I do like having things that represent the stuff I like and knowing what I like, making sure that I have some of it to be, I don't know whether it's a reflection on my personality, whatever it is. I enjoy it and it makes me happy. And I think that everybody kind of can understand that on this call. Yeah, so that's kind of my, that's the short version from me.
Well, I have to ask you a question in regards to some of the stuff, because obviously what I'm noticing in your background is that you collect some Beatles stuff. I've been meaning to ask this question every single time I see it. What is in the apple?
Oh, so that is just a lamp. When I moved into my first apartment, I went to IKEA, obviously, to get everything. And I was mostly just getting, you know, chest of drawers, bed, all that kind of stuff. But in the lighting section, I saw an apple, and my very first thought was, oh crap, that looks exactly like the Beatles recording studio label. So I picked it up. And then I like to place it next to my Beatles on mono that I have over here, which is the CD version. And these are all recreations of all of their albums that were pressed on mono. So it only goes up through the White Album because they did not do a dedicated mono mix of Abbey Road. But that's what this is over there. And
That's
while
awesome.
you can't see it on the way I have the camera set up, I have like similar mirror shelves. I have another shelf over there that is all My Chemical Romance stuff.
Nice.
So that's what it is in my world.
Okay, just to let everybody know, Cami is trying to get back. She's having some technical difficulties, but we will definitely make sure that we keep in contact with her. So I was trying to figure out how to answer this question. And I think what's so funny is it actually did start with superheroes when it came to me collecting before I officially started collecting comics, because I bought my first comic book when I was 9 years old, and it was an X-Men series of comic books. I know Andy heard this story. I picked up the first 3 issues of the story that was written by Scott Lobdell, Executioner's Song, which is a great story. I said I just reread it, which was awesome. But my collecting goes all the way back to when I was, I think, 3 years old. And the 2 things that I loved alongside some of the greater known cartoons of the 80s were Hanna-Barbera's Super Friends and the 1966 Adam West Batman show. Those were 2 of my favorite things in the whole world. I like the fact that I actually was a fan of that show when I was really young, because clearly, while my parents are not really big into pop culture as I am, at least I'm glad to know that they know what's good in this world. And that's definitely one of the best things that we ever received. So yeah, I collected action figures. My mom would go out and she would get me, you know, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. I still remember how much I begged her to get me the Hall of Justice while everybody else was getting Castle Grayskull. But when I got the Hall of Justice, I was over elated. And as I got older, there were a bunch of other things that I really started to collect, because it was just cool to actually have these things, so you can always just look at them and appreciate, you know, little nostalgic memories that you remember yourself watching these shows or reading these comics or whatever it was. But, you know, when I was deciding to get back into collecting comics after not reading them ever since I was in high school, it's just been amazing to just read these unbelievable stories, see these great artists, these writers, and even with the anime that I watch, it's all just fascinating to me. And I just love the fact that when I get these things, I never have a sense of buyer's remorse, because it's like there's a lot of people that will say, why do you do this? And that's another thing that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But I guess the other question is, besides the things that you got drawn to, Andy's already answered this question. He had someone that influenced him. He had his father, the person who read him Batman when he was a little kid for bedtime stories. So that's, first of all, something that I personally wish I had. Not to say that I don't get along with my parents, but to know that a father passed something like that down to his son. I mean, I know that he is not here tonight, but just so everybody knows, Dan actually has taken a little bit of a hiatus. He has some very important obligations, but I got to see him very recently, and I sat down with his oldest son, and this boy loves collecting comics just like his dad. And that's a wonderful feeling. So when you reflect on those types of things, Andy, how does it make you feel, especially because of the fact that you both have a tradition of going to New York Comic Con together every year? That's amazing.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and it's something we share, and I mean, I'm sure you guys all have this with various people in your life, but like these fandoms and my collecting like does give me an avenue to connect with people that's really wonderful and that I don't take for granted. It definitely warms my heart to hear about Dan and his son, because I definitely get the vibe and know what that feels like, and it makes me really happy to hear that he can experience something like that, because it's definitely the big thing that I share with my dad is a love of comics and a love of generic fandom in general. Like Steve said, going to Comic-Con every year is an important thing that I really, really look forward to. So it's it's a big part of who I am, and I'm glad that I get to share that with people.
Let me just let you know, Andy, Dan's son asked me, are you going to come with me and my father to the Midtown Comics outlet? I was like, oh, definitely. And I know that I'm sure you're coming with us, Andy. Daniel would love for you to join us. But
Hell yeah.
Shay, who were some of the people in your life that influenced you?
Well, reading in general is my father. He always encouraged me to read. He bought me my copy of The Secret Garden that is thrashed to heck. I still have it. It is like the front cover is like taped to the book. Like it is that thrashed. Like it has stickers and stamps all over like the like this book is mine kind of thing. I had to make sure everybody knew it was mine. So, that's one of my like most treasured possessions at this point. And when it came to Beanie Babies, it was my dad who kind of encouraged me to keep going after I got the first one. And like we would go on what we called beanie runs
I did those.
there were like 5 or 6 different little stops that we would go. And so on Saturday, he and I would go for a couple of hours and we'd go and see if there were ones we were looking for that we didn't have yet. And I just loved that my dad got on board with me collecting in that way, because there wasn't ever really anything else that I was that passionate about. I mean, I had Barbies and stuff as a kid, but I wasn't ever like diehard Barbie girl. Like I wasn't. I took whatever Barbies were in front of me and fine. I didn't have to have specific ones or anything like that. I didn't have any of those collection like princess Barbies that were ginormous and expensive. Like I never had those. My dad was a school teacher. We made like zero money. So the fact that my parents like spend all this money to like give me a beanie collection, and a lot of the times my dad had to buy duplicates because my mom started to collect them at the same time. My mom still decorates her house seasonally with her Beanie Babies.
That's awesome.
It slays me. It's so cute. And then when I started to collect manga, like my husband's been very supportive. Yes, he wishes I would spend a little less money and not collect quite as quick as I have, but he still doesn't stop me from collecting. And he's just like, okay, you got to pull back a little bit. Like, you're spending a little too much. But like, that's just him being a reasonable human being and being my partner. And I love him so much for encouraging me to just embrace what makes me happy. Cause I have to say, I'm the happiest I've probably ever been in my adult life.
Amazing.
At this point, and a lot of that's having a really good partner by my side who's really supportive of me in all my endeavors.
Yeah, I think that that's actually something that I think we can all share, because I have not met you ladies. I have not met your significant others entirely. I mean, I have seen them in passing. I've talked to
Jeff is awesome.
your husband once
He's
or
the
twice,
super
Shay,
roommate.
but Andy and I are real good friends in real life, and he has met my spouse. I have met his spouse, who is also a proud booktuber. Wonderful to know. But it's nice to know that, yeah, there are some days where they could say, you know, maybe you shouldn't spend. I'm going to go into a really funny story later because it's not my turn. But Cammie, you sort of touched upon the fact that your mother was someone who encouraged you, which is also a wonderful thing, because that's actually one of the few things that I sort of lacked. I never really had a parent that supported me in my collecting. But I'd like to know, were there any other influencers in regards to your love of collecting things?
No, there hasn't been a single man until my husband that has supported my collecting like my mother. I have had so much resistance for my entire adult life. And I think it stemmed back to when I was a teenager. I didn't have a lot of friends, but I had a girlfriend that, because I lived in a rural area, she would drive me back and forth to school when we were in high school. And for one reason or another, one morning she came into the house and came into my room. And I was 17 and I still had Barbie doll houses in my room. You know, it was just a very natural thing for me. And she made a comment and she's like, oh, you saw Barbies in your room, you know? And it really wasn't to be mean or malicious, I don't think. I just think that it wasn't normal to her because she was older, not older than me. I mean, we're the same age, but she was doing older things. And I was still very much locked into my 12-year-old mindset, you know? So after that, I kind of became very an introverted collector until I would say I met my husband, and then he saw a lot of the things that I had in boxes and encouraged me to take them out of boxes. He's like, I don't understand why you have all these amazing things that you've collected that you love, that you're passionate about, and that I can see it in your eyes when you talk about it, when you tell me about Alice, or when you tell me about Disney, or when you talk about a book, a magical book you just read, and you're hiding it. Why? And I said, well, you know, I've always made my home an adult home, so if anybody ever came over, it was suitable, you know, like you have the perfect living room and you entertain in the kitchen. And then I was like, screw that, I've got lightsaber lights, they're going in the living room tonight. And that was it. Like, what you see behind me has just not stopped since we started dating. And I told him, you did this, you let this beast out of the closet, because I was perfectly fine with MIPs, and now I'm this out of box collector. And I love it though, because I want to mimic what Shay just said. I am the happiest I have ever been in my adult life because I'm living my true self. I'm not afraid to hide who I am. I'm not embarrassed. I'll be 40 years old in less than 60 days. And I could not be happier being who I am and loving what I love and sharing it with people that I love. This right here, what I'm doing, having a conversation with you people and people just like you, is my favorite thing in the whole world, because this validates me. This lets me know that there's people like me out there that are just as happy as I am in their little bubbles with all of their things. And I support you, and I love that. And I love that you support me. And that is why I do this. It's joy. It's pure joy.
Andy can definitely vouch for me because of all the compliments that I get when people see my Guy Fieri Funko Pop guarding my kitchen. Everyone thinks that that is the coolest thing in the world. Even my mother, who came to visit today, saw those food product Funko Pops and actually thought that was kind of cute how they were all in the kitchen. But anyway, April.
Okay, so I will start off by saying I am a product of my parents, kind of like a lot of us. My parents, they don't collect like this, but my family, we have a lot of debates, and it's not just intellectual debates. It's over different TV shows, it's over different sci-fi things. I mean, we like to try to one up each other.
Oh.
And so, like I mentioned, a lot of my pursuit of picking up a lot of things is because I want to further expand into the universe so that I know the full story, so that I know a lot of the things. And that's kind of what drives me a lot of the time. And that's because always at the dinner table, it was always these kind of discussions where, we would test each other on what we really knew. But it also has a deeper root into my parents trying to bribe me growing up. So I wasn't always the biggest reader. Reading didn't come naturally to me. So every summer, my parents would give me a penny per page for reading. And so it became this challenge to see how much money I could collect. And then it became, okay, I will buy you so many books depending on what kind of grades you get. And then so I slowly started amassing this small library, which was my little container of knowledge that then in turn into this dinner time debates that just full cycle drove everything and resulted in that behind me. It's basically the big influence. And my husband knew what he was getting into when he married me. He saw my book collection and he's okay with it. He doesn't care. It keeps me entertained. And then I also have all of my art supplies, which I like to keep in rainbow order, which started with me wanting every single Crayola crayon so I could color a piece of paper with every single Crayola crayon because there was just something magical in that.
Side note on that real fast, like my family, we have like random quotes from like various things that we've all seen together that just make it into our normal conversation. So when I first started dating my husband, he had a hard time like keeping up with our normal like dinner banter because half of it was quoting something else we'd all seen. And so we were like laughing and we kept the quote going and he's just like, this is a lot. But now he like understands it, and if he is like doesn't follow it enough, he just checks out till we're done. So like I think each family, especially when there's like nerd culture, I mean, we're Star Trek, Star Wars, all that kind of stuff in our house too. Star Trek is superior to Star Wars. I'm sorry, it is. For various reasons, we will not get into that discussion.
I will only agree with you on that unless we're talking about everything pre-J.J. Abrams.
It's a discussion for another day. We'll just
Fair
have
enough.
that.
Fair
I'm
enough.
sensing a new video.
There we go. But like, so I think all of us in our families have our little quirky things. Like my brothers and my dad, like they'll have all their sports talk, and me and my mom, we have our things we talk about when they get all sportsy. And like all families have their different dynamics. So when you come from a nerdy kind of family where like you name your pet bunny who's albino Gandalf the White, like that's the kind of house I grew up in. Like I think we all have those different things in our growing up that just kind of became part of our family and we didn't even think about really until we became adults. It's like, oh yeah, we really were that nerdy family, weren't we?
Trying to piggyback off of that because it's kind of like a derivative of where April started. But yeah, I think that for me also having that stability in the home, because I know that you said, Steve, your parents really weren't as supportive. I think that fueled it. And that's why I stayed as youthful as I did in my mind and in my heart for as long as I did, because it was acceptable. And it breaks my heart when I see parents force their children to grow up and force their children to read certain things. And you need to be here and you need to be focused on this. And it's like, if you just let your child be who they are and experience life for all its joys, all its magic, all its fandoms, your child will find out exactly who they are and they will be an incredible human being for it. Don't stifle your child at any age. Let them experiment. Let them, blow things up. Let them try on a different movie. Don't let them watch Star Trek. But that said, no, I'm just kidding. No, but I mean, I to this day thank my parents every time I speak to them over the phone for allowing me to be the child that I was able to be. And I think my entire adult life has been chasing that childhood high, to feel exactly the way I did as a child, walking into my childhood bedroom and looking at all the posters on the wall and all of the different fandoms that I was allowed to be a part of, because my mom and my dad made it accessible to me, and they didn't make fun of me for it. They didn't tell me I couldn't do it. They just said, yeah, if you love it, great. And they watched the movies with me. They, played the board games with me. They did all of the right things. And I have the coolest parents, and I love them to pieces. And I'm so glad to hear that a lot of you did have that same experience, because I really do think that it does fuel you as an adult to keep this going, because you do have to continue an imagination. You do have to, in some ways, continue to be childlike in your adult days in order to allow this to happen in your home, because this is abnormal to a lot of people. A lot, they think you're crazy. The big things is that you hear a lot, look at what you could do with all that money, well, I did it, and I love it, and I look at it all the time, and I play with it.
Yeah, we are it's like they say in the Making Fun, the Story of Funko documentary, when the guy Crofty says, you are the odd duck, and people think that you have towers of these figures staring at you in the middle of the night, and he's like, it's all true. But anyway, I have to elaborate a little bit more on what I said. It's not that my parents were not really fans of the fact that I spent my money on collecting, but it's their fault that I collected all this stuff. My dad always said to me, oh, you got to watch these James Bond movies. You got to watch Star Trek. Well, why do I have James Bond comic books and a James Bond Funko Pop and a bunch of Star Trek little spaceship micro machines? Because he told me to watch these. Why do I love the Beatles and have so much Beatles merchandise? And why do I have little things that resemble movies like Animal House and Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Because my mom said you have to watch all these movies, you got to listen to all this music. So if anything, they planted the seeds of me appreciating great things in popular culture, but they didn't know what it was going to turn into. It's like when they see my big Mace Windu lightsaber right over there on my basement fireplace mantle. If my mom did not try to get me to shut up in a video store at age 9 because they didn't have 3 ninjas and said, oh, Star Wars will shut this kid up, let me let him watch this. Look what she created. So it's her, I'd always tell her it's your fault. Or just this morning when she came to visit, I was showing her some Funko Pops and I just showed her my brand new Seinfeld Pops. Why do I have them? Well, guess who asked me to start watching Seinfeld? And the funny thing is, she was telling me, they don't have certain episodes on TV anymore because they're not politically correct. I said, well, why do you think I have the DVDs?
On that, just the parents encouraging things. So musically, my parents were definitely my influences, and I listened to most everything. It's only the really hard screamo rock that I don't really particularly enjoy, but outside of that, I pretty much listen to everything. But so my parents took me to my first concert. I was 8, and it was the Beach Boys before they all started to die. It was amazing. I still visually remember parts of it, and I remember my ears ringing for 3 days afterwards. That much I remember. But the next concert I went to, I was a teenager, and it was the Backstreet Boys. It was their Millennium Tour. It was they were the hot tickets in town. And my mom took me and my friends, because she was the cool mom. She took us to the concert and we had the best time. And my mom was frustrated because she's like, I want to hear him sing. Y'all are screaming too loud. And it was the best. And we actually kind of relived that a bit a few years ago. We went to Vegas while Backstreet Boys was doing their Vegas show and went for my birthday. That was literally my birthday present. So we stayed at Planet Hollywood. We went to the show and then we went back home the next day. It was a short trip because I live roughly 6 hours from Vegas. So it's really not that far of a drive. And so it was really just so much fun. So to this day, my parents still fuel my fandoms in a lot of ways. So it's great.
Well, and in regards to some of the other things, also my wife Jen, she's also very supportive because when I first met her, she collected books, lots and lots of books, all the books that you see on our shelves. I know that Andy and his wife have seen them. I would probably say that about 70% of the books in our house belong to her. And now her newest fad is she now is buying these wraparound skirts made from sari material. So it's like whenever she says, I'm going to buy another bunch of skirts, I'm, great. So I'm going to go buy a couple more comic books and not feel guilty about this. So we have our own little collections, and we're both very supportive of the fact that we do collect it, because Jen definitely knows that if I didn't have comic books to read, the pandemic probably would have driven me mad. But in regards to people who influenced me today, it's really my friends. I mean, for crying out loud, why am I buying all these Funko Pops? Because Cammie and I just can't stop talking about these things. Andy even has a couple of them because of me too, because they're just some things that he didn't know were happening, and he's like, oh my God, I love this stuff. But Andy also fuels my passion for comic books and music and all that stuff, because he loves this stuff too. I mean, I remember this one time when we were at a Barnes and Noble and he was looking for some new vinyls to decorate his office space with. So I was just using the music knowledge that I have, and oh, this one looks pretty cool, or that one, or that one. It was just fun. That's what I love so much about collecting. It's also because of the fact that you got your friends, and you know, my brother-in-law loves these types of things. Also, I got a lot more into sports over the last couple of years. And of course, now I have sports stars as Funko Pops and a bunch of New York Mets bobbleheads. So it's the fandom, and it's even collecting the sports stuff as well. And it's even been that I'm even creating my own collections. I have collections of useless knowledge on lists. Like I have handwritten lists of all the best picture winners of the Academy Award or all the Disney classics, because it's important to know this stuff. So I want to preserve it and have it in my own little possession from my own way. So yeah, I am totally an odd duck, but I have no shame in it. And it's because of the fact that we now have a community. It's like all of us. YouTube has basically given the way for all people like us who never had a true circle of friends that love these kinds of things. We're all finding each other now. It is absolutely crazy how YouTube has brought nerd culture together and the people that love it together. So how do we handle those who think we're out of our minds? April, do you want to start?
I mean, at this point, I don't have a lot of interaction with those kind of people because I mean, I have this community that I can talk to, and most of my friends, both online and real life, I mean, they totally understand that. That's why I interact with them in the first place. I mean, and if I do meet those occasional people, like, is this something that's healthy for you? I'm like, I mean, you can give me those comments at this point, but I'm content and happy enough of where I'm at that it doesn't bother me.
I think it was actually Walter Jones who played the original Black Ranger who once said, nerdy used to not be cool, but now everything is beloved. Nerdy is cool now. So it's just the way it is. I think that all these people, if we were all young, I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one that was bullied for liking things like comic books and superheroes and Power Rangers and stuff like that. But now it's so funny because all of these people who were doing the bullying are suddenly realizing, this stuff is actually kind of cool. I mean, what are some of the highest grossing movies in the world right now? The Marvel films. I wasn't even allowed to show my love for X-Men in public because it was considered uncool. But now it's the greatest thing in the world to everybody. Whenever someone wants to talk about, like, what's the best movie you've ever seen, at almost all the time, it's a comic book based film these days. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Mine are usually anime films these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's also something that was just so underground. Even when I was
have a
in
painting
college,
of one of my favorites right there.
even when I was in college, it was like manga was just this unknown thing. Like not that many people really knew what it was. It was like you would go into a retail store and you wouldn't find any anime unless you went all the way into the back of the store. That's where it used to be. But now manga is outselling Western comic books.
Yeah, it's what saved Barnes and Noble during the pandemic. They flat out told me that in the store.
Mm-hmm. Cammie, I'm sure you've got a story.
Well, I think I shared the one that was probably the most memorable for me, what happened to me when I was 17, and that stuck with me for a long time. I just always thought maybe there's something wrong with me, maybe I should grow up, kind of thing. But in the back of my mind, I kind of always knew I had all of these things stored. So it wasn't like I was going to go and sell them because somebody said something to me, full well knowing that many people live their lives to accommodate other people. And I never wanted to be one of those people. I never wanted to do things because it was the social norm or it was what society expected of me, or I should be wearing a certain thing. Like, for goodness sakes, I wore a Mr. Potato Head shirt to lunch today. I mean, that's just who I am. But I think that for me, being who I am and being my true authentic self, I'm like this everywhere I go, whether I'm just casually hanging out with friends, whether I'm with my parents. And so I think that adds a certain charm to me, because the person that you see on YouTube, the person that makes the videos, is the same person you would meet if you met me in person. And, April and Shay have met me in person. And I think that they would attest that who you've seen on YouTube is who I am in life. I'm a goofball. I laugh, I joke around. I will wear a inappropriate shirt to, just about any occasion. Ask me to throw on something fancy, sure, I'll do it. Just give me a warning, or I'm gonna, show up in like a Star Wars shirt or something like that. That's just me, because that's my wardrobe. But, in terms of internet hate, I, much like April had said, I tend to ignore it, or I will turn that comment around on the person. I think sometimes a negative comment is a true reflection of the person that's giving it to you. Either they're not happy in their life, they're going through something, and they just want to reflect that anger or that hate on you because they're just not happy with themselves. And what people need to understand is, for someone like me and like the rest of you, is that we are happy with who we are and what we showcase and what we talk about and what we share. And I think that the more we do it, I think those people just kind of disappear after a while, because if you entertain negativity, it will constantly be there. You'll find it, you'll look for it, you'll gravitate to it. But if you tend to kind of just reverse it and throw a positive to a negative, or just kind of push those people to the wayside, eventually they'll go away because they're not getting from you the reaction that they'd hoped for. I've been told some horrendous things since I've been making myself more public, for various reasons, because I've chosen to come public with certain things, or I've chosen to take a stance on something that is far removed from what society wants me to think or be or believe. And I'm too old for this shit. I am who I am. I'm an old lady who likes colorful things, but I will love you no matter, what you stand for, even if it's a polar opposite of me. If you're a cool person, that's all I look for. I'm friends with people who are nothing like me. So I just feel like you need to take the haters on with that grain of salt. If you're really just going to be continuously an angry person with nothing nice to say, I can guarantee you won't be in my circle for long, because I have no use for you.
Okay.
Well, I kind of get hate for different reasons. It's not necessarily for my collection or what I choose to collect. I get a lot of people saying, why don't you collect this, this, and this? I get a lot more comments like that than I do hate. And I make it pretty clear to people, when it comes to manga, I tend to prefer to watch my action series as opposed to read them. I feel like I get more out of them. I enjoy them more. So I don't collect a lot of physical action series, because I don't get as much enjoyment out of reading them as I do out of watching them, where they have the epic score, the good animation, all that kind of stuff. Like, I feel like that helps my enjoyment of the stories, because I tend to gravitate naturally towards things that are a little more slice of life, a little more romance, a little quieter. So like just in my normal reading. So of course that's what I'm going to gravitate towards in my graphic formats as well. So I get a lot of flack for not collecting certain things or not reading certain things, but I just don't enjoy them. I don't enjoy overly violent graphic media. Like, I never have. So it's one of those things where, you know, I get a lot of flack for that. And then I get a lot of flack for my personal appearance being a plus size person. The amount of comments I have to block calling me a fat cow and all sorts of other horrible things would probably shock most of you, but I just ignore them. It's like, clearly that comment's more about you than me, because if you're taking the time to sit here and bully me, there's something else going on with you. And that's just kind of what I've gotten to with any sort of negative comment. I do have people correct me sometimes if I say something wrong, or, you know, they feel like they're in own voices for something I've read and they're like, hey, this is really kind of incorrect. It should be this way. And it's just like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Sometimes I'll pin that comment so that people watching my video know that I've acknowledged that this is a thing, and just kind of move forward from there.
Right. Andy, I can't seem to figure anyone that would actually dislike you for the type of person that you are, because you just have this social life and this circle of friends that is just unimaginably amazing. Like, I think anybody would want to live in your shoes for a day. And this is me as a friend saying this to you. So, have you ever gotten any negative feedback in regards to anything that you have collected or shared with people?
My mom will never let me forget that when I was 13, and I quote, I once said, you know, Mom, it's really great that I will never experience peer pressure because I have no peers. So,
Wow.
no. So, like, there are people who don't get along with me, I'm sure, but I have never devoted a lot of mental energy to it or let myself worry about it. The way I described it to my friends recently with how many people know me and know us and all the things we do is, you know, yes, I wouldn't call me popular. No, I wouldn't say I was cool, but I've been a loser with volume my whole life. And that's how I like it, and I'm happy about that.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there was always people that were like saying to me, you know, I just don't agree with what you're doing because I just don't get it. I mean, that was the nicest way of going. And that's usually what came from my parents, because they just wanted me, you know, but they were just looking out for the best. They just wanted me, you know, understand the value of money, knowing that one day, you know, you're going to get married, you're going to have a house, you're going to hopefully have children one day. You want to make sure that you are able to support everything that you hold near and dear to your heart. But the truth of the matter is, while all those things are very important, and yes, those are things that I truly make a top priority, these things that I collect are just as important, just because of the fact that they are what make me the person who I am. I mean, when I was living with my parents in my early 20s and still not really getting out there in my life and trying to make the next step, you know, I had a real heart to heart with my father, and he said to me, you know, just don't understand why this is the type of stuff that your money goes to. And I just said to him, you don't love this stuff the way I do. You just don't understand. But what you need to understand is that it just makes me happy. And maybe it was just one day where it just clicked in his head, where he saw me just watching a movie or something. Or maybe it was just the fact that he saw me going into these details into a movie that we watched together and loved together. Because he always knew that I collect comic books, and he knew that I loved superheroes. So maybe it was a superhero movie. And it was around that time where he actually said to me, Steve, I get it. I understand. Even though I would like you to just take into consideration the more important things in life. And I just said to him, trust me, it's going to happen. And the minute that Jen came into my life was the day that, you know, a light bulb just shot up and like went on, because I was like, this is it. Now, how do I get there? And how can I find that balance? That's really what it was all about for me. It was about making sure that I can still feed my passions, but at the same time, make sure that the more important things in life are the things that are always handled first. So that's why I work hard, but I play harder. And people who know me know that to the greatest extent. Andy's shaking his head because he gets it.
My face is hurting from smiling because there's a lot of joy in this episode. It's not even just the last like minute, but like legitimately, I've done this a few times. It's like I'm sitting here like, it's great. It's great.
So
do you want to piggyback off of what you just said real quick though, Steve, before you go on? Because I think that's something that I continuously point out to my haters, whether it be, you know, someone that just makes a comment in passing, or, you know, sometimes it's even my mom. She'll say, okay, how much is enough? You know, it's never enough, I can tell you that. But I want to point out, as an adult, I think it's very important, because money does come up a lot when people are trying to understand and conceptualize how much money we spend, is that I've never gone hungry. I've never missed a mortgage payment. I've never missed a car payment, you know. So I think it's really important to say that I'm an extremely responsible adult before I'm a child. You know, I am fully aware of my responsibilities, my place in society, what I need to have done. So that's all done beforehand. This is a place though that's my sanctuary. My home is my happy place, and so why not fill it with all of the things that bring me genuine joy? And people are never going to understand, you know, spending money for anything that is a toy, because in a lot of people's minds, a toy is a child's thing. At some point you grow up, because that's how society has molded us. But in the same regard, have you ever sold a toy for 15 times its value because you kept it meant in box your entire life? Bet you haven't done that, hater boy, you know? So I tell people this, there is some reciprocation to this craziness that happens with us, because we probably, I think some of you can probably attest to this, don't keep everything, but we will outgrow things, we will change our minds on things, but usually we will find someone that we can sell these things to that will love them just like we did, and we don't lose out any monetary value. We actually in most cases get more, because time has gone on and you can't find these things anymore. Am I right?
Actually, one of the funny things, I have to sort of refute something that you just said in regards to toys. I don't know where I saw this from. It might have been a YouTube video. It might have been something, but people are saying kids don't buy toys anymore. It's kids who grew up in the 80s and 90s that are buying all the toys. Well, I cannot complain about the fact that when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, you know, come at me, we had the greatest toys. We did. The greatest toys, the greatest video games, the greatest TV shows, the greatest everything. We had
earlier in the episode, you mentioned Grayskull Castle. We had a Grayskull Castle.
We had the good shit. No kid understands how awesome toys were when we were all growing up in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, my brother has actually inherited all of the Star Wars like figurines and like play sets and stuff for his kids, because like it's all Star Wars and stuff. So he has all of the Star Wars toys. He has a few that are mint in box that he still loves and adores, of course, but like his boys all play with the stuff that he played with.
I mean, look, my ultimate goal is to have, even if it's my own child, or maybe it might be a cousin or something like that, you know, a young person that is going to appreciate these things, you know, I would love to pass the collection down rather than sell it, because I just feel like, you know, I mean, the joke right now in the house is the fact that I'm going to be buried with all my stuff because there's nobody to give it to. But I really hope that there is going to be a day where I can actually say to a younger family member, even if it's not one of my own children, I'm like, I want you to have this, because you understand how much this means to me, and I want you to carry on that legacy. So with that being said, we're just going to go quickly around the room, and then we'll elaborate a little bit more. I'd like everyone to talk about what they are collecting today that they love the most. It could be a single thing, or it could be a bunch of things. So I want to go to the collecting queen herself. Cami, what are things that you are collecting today? Like, what are your ultimate favorites besides the ones that I know about? Or are they the only ones?
Which would be Funko.
Yep.
I think Funko is still my top contender, just because I went really hard in 2020 with finishing collections that have just kind of been ones and twos that I wanted to complete. I also, though, did change my collection habits in 2020 because I didn't go a lot of places, so I was surrounded in my stuff. So instead of being a completist now I'm an intentional collector. Like, do I need 7 stitches? No, you don't. But 1 or 2 is cute, you know? So I am not a crazy collector, but I think you don't know this because I haven't talked about this, but this is my new obsession, and I did it because of Funko Pops. Have you guys heard of mini brands? This is the grocery store that the mini brands go in. This is where I'm at, level expert. So yeah, I don't need to be collecting this. For goodness sakes, it's a miniature shopping cart. You put your miniature brands and your miniature shopping cart on your miniature shelves. I've gone nuts with this. So they have it in food and they also have it in toys, miniature toys. They are literally like micro-sized, so much detail though. And I got them to accompany my Funko Pops in photographs for Instagram. But it has become such an obsession. So they come in this little plastic ball. You get 5 surprises. You don't know what you're going to get. And I'm obsessed with these things. So yeah, I think that, and I every now and then I'll add something to like an existing collection, but those are my 2 main ones right now.
April?
Well, I kind of talked about like the 2 big things that I really like to collect is, of course, my books, my reading material, the things that I love to expand my knowledge and my fandoms with. But you can't see it, and I have too much. I can't even show it. I have right next to me is just a rainbow of, I've got Copics, I've got polychromos, I've got Faber-Castells, I've got all the different kinds of alcohol markers and everything under the sun that just makes me so happy to use and to look at. And it's glorious. And I don't need every single color in existence, but I need every single color in existence. And even if I don't always use every kind of coloring material, if there's a brand I really like, I want to try everything that they put out. And then I end up ultimately wanting every single color they put out. But I do have little things inside of, say, my reading collection that I really gravitate towards. I am a fairy tale lover. It's always been my first and greatest joy. And so I've always made it a habit of, every time I go into a used bookstore or every time I'm in another country, I go to a bookstore and I try and find a volume of either Grimm's fairy tales or Hans Christian Andersen or
whatever's native to wherever you are.
Yeah, anything classic like that. So I have like a whole shelf of all of these different editions of all of those things. And I mean, my guinea pigs are named after the Brothers Grimm's and their sister, because I mean, that's who I am. I love it so much. And that's also a lot of where my book collection is. It's a lot of those retellings and things like that.
Yeah, I'm going to say right now that my real collection that I'm focusing on right now is my comic book collection. And Andy also knows that I was about to embark on a major project, which I actually have already started to do, but I haven't gotten into the nitty gritty. But apparently I found out how you can read the entirety of Marvel's comics and DC Comics print runs in order. Like, you can go all the way back to the golden age of comics and work your way up. So I was like, okay, I am going to start putting my books into chronological order outside of certain mini series that are not part of the continuity. So I have just been having a blast, even though it has been hurting a little bit from lifting all these boxes, but it has already begun. And everything else that I've been collecting, you know, it's music, it's movies and TV and Funko Pops. Those are basically my other 3 big collections, but those have slowly been filtering down just because of the fact that my collections have basically gotten to the point where I have just about everything that I want. So it's all just a matter of when does the new album from this one artist that I love just come out, because I just went and got the brand new Maroon 5 album because I'm actually happy that it actually is a decent album, because the last one was terrible, which I didn't buy. But right now with my Funko Pops, I'm collecting the Seinfeld line because I've been waiting for a Seinfeld Funko line since 2013 and it's finally here. So I'm excited about that. And movies, you know, whenever the next big movie that I loved is going to be on DVD or Blu-ray, I will definitely pick it up. My wife and I are going to see In the Heights when she's finally finished with school. I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be a movie that we end up owning, not just seeing, because my wife is a big fan of that musical, and we're both big fans of Lin-Manuel Miranda. I am waiting for my little Lee Scoresby from his role in His Dark Materials on HBO as a Funko Pop to arrive in the mail. So I'm very excited to have a little Lin-Manuel Miranda in my collection, which is going to be great. But Shay?
Well, primarily I collect books and manga, but I would say there are three things that are like my obsessive collection things. So Haikyuu, anything. Like this is the longest running series that I own in my collection right now, and this is the penultimate volume. There's technically one more to come out. But I've read it all because you can read it all online on an app, and it's like legit and legal and everything. But I never thought in my life I would care so much about 12 teenage boys playing volleyball ever. Ever. But I am obsessed. They are my precious children and they must be protected at all costs. And they must all be happy. Then Yona of the Dawn. I talk obsessively about Yona of the Dawn on my channel. You watch almost any one of my videos, I will find a way to talk about something from Yona. But I would die for these two if they were actual human beings. I love this series. This is like light on the romance, heavy on a political fantasy story. And like you don't get that from the first season of the anime. You're just kind of getting all the characters introduced. So you don't get any of the meat of the story. But I continued on, like I hadn't watched the anime till after I was past that point in the manga anyway, but this is one where like the second it's in my hands from the bookstore or from the publisher, I sit down and I read it. It's like top priority. This is like my top priority collect. It's still ongoing in Japan. It may surpass this in volumes. I don't know, but all I know is I'm in it till the end, no matter what happens. And then thirdly is anything Brandon Sanderson. Like Brandon Sanderson is one of the best authors out there, in my opinion, right now in the fantasy space. This is his most recent comic story, Dark One.
It is awesome.
My cats are named Kaladin and Lightsong, both Cosmere related stories. Kaladin is from the Stormlight Archive and Lightsong is from Warbreaker, which is my favorite Sanderson novel. And I just think he's truly a king of his craft. Yes, he lives local to me. He lives in the town that I was born and raised in. And I just really admire his work ethic. The dude publishes more than anybody I know, except for like indie authors who do it just to make enough money. And secondly, no one writes worlds as diversely and as connected as he does. Like he has a whole universe that all connects. But these are full length, 55 hours long novels on audio sometimes. Like he has so much to say and so much to tell that it's hard to not fall in love with what he does.
Dark One review coming to this channel very soon. Andy?
Yeah, so I guess recently the thing I've been collecting, even though I started by saying I don't consider myself like a collector, completionist, one thing I do in the before times especially was I would play a lot of Magic the Gathering with my friends. So there's people who have incredibly valuable and incredibly vast Magic collections, and I'm not one of those people. But part of why I consider myself such a big fan of Magic is that it's a great like cross section of various things in fandom that I like. And that's not only is it a game, but there's fantasy art and there's also stories from really talented creators that they publish officially, both as ebooks, printed work online. There's now a comic series that Steve has actually been picking up the comics for me as they come out, and then I've gotten them from him after the fact. But anyway, this is my way of saying that recently the thing I've been collecting is, even though most people who play Magic, and this has fallen out of fashion recently, completing sets because people really just buy the individual cards that are important from each set. I worked to get myself a full set of one of the newer sets called War of the Spark. It's kind of like Magic's take on Infinity War / Endgame. It's like all of the major characters from the last 10 years came together in a set to take down like the big bad of the last 10 years. Actually, one of the characters in it is Davriel, who was written by Brandon Sanderson, who you were just talking about.
Yeah.
So that's his only card in the game was in this set.
I do believe he's contributing to the comic series.
Yeah,
well.
so he has been doing stuff for Magic. I'm not sure what's on the horizon, but he did write a novella about the character Davriel that came out, I think it was 2019. That's wonderful. Anyway,
he is actually an avid Magic player. He has a private like Magic group that he still has.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And I also have started to dip my toe into trying to get foil versions of all of these cards as well. I've been doing pretty good at it. I don't have every single foil, but as I was flipping through there, if you saw a lot of shiny pages, it's because I'm doing a decent job at it.
Yeah, I basically have become Andy's comic pusher lately. Also, Dan's as well. I literally go to stores and buy stuff for them, and they pay me back when I get their stuff. But anyway, that will lead into a very interesting question, and that is going to be a couple of tips and tricks for how you keep your collections, especially when it comes to comic book collecting and even manga collecting, because even though they are two completely different styles of reading material, I'm pretty sure that there are specific tips and tricks in regards to keeping those books in good condition. Because if there's one thing that I know about the book community, the one thing that people really do not enjoy talking about is cracked spines. That is like a reader's nightmare because they want those books to be preserved in the best condition possible. So I'm just going to start a little bit off on a couple of really interesting things that I picked up when I started collecting comics again in 2019. So I have a few samples, and I keep my comics in boxes, the traditional comic book short box or long box. And I had one or two actually when I was growing up. So I actually did not know a couple of interesting things in regards to keeping those books in those boxes in better ways, because I didn't think about the fact that the comics at some point in time would be in the box. And if there weren't that many that filled up the box, they would slant. I didn't know anything about spine rolls or anything to that extent. And I also didn't realize that you shouldn't put your comics in the box on one side. So what does that mean? Well, that basically means you take a stack of comic books like so, and you just stack them all in the box one way, like so. What I didn't know was when you do that, if you take a look, you probably can't tell because they're in their bags and boards. And again, I thought that bags and boards were the best way to keep things preserved. I didn't know that when you keep comic books uniformly in one direction, that the weight distribution is uneven. The side with the staples happens to have more weight than the side that doesn't. So that's what causes the spine ticks and the paint smudges and the spine rolls. I didn't know that. So what I've learned is you take a comic and then you put the second one like that. And you do the same thing like that, facing forward, a Brandon Sanderson comic. facing away, facing forward, facing away, etc., etc. And you put them in the box that way, and it evenly distributes the weight while they're sitting in the box. Another thing that I didn't think about was the comic books that are at the very back or at the very front. Inside the box itself, there's a lip on the bottom. If there's too much pressure on the comic book, it's going to create a crease. So you can get these in Amazon. I got like a pack of 25 of them. Just cardboard, just plain rectangles of cardboard. You can cut them with a box cutter to make them fit your book. Put those in the front and the back of the box so they don't have the comic book leaning on the lip. Didn't know that. I thought that that was pretty cool. And not just the comic itself, but the bag and board or something you want to have last for a while, because yes, they will rot a little bit just because of the fact that these things aren't vacuum sealed. I mean, I don't have enough money for Mylar bags because it's so expensive. So yes, I just use the regular polypropylene bags with the acid protected boards on one side. No big deal. But you also have to tape them. And I used to just put the piece of tape on the bag. So when it came to wanting to take the comic out to show to someone or read it, you would stretch the tape. You'd probably tear the tape. You'd even tear the bag, and you'd have to get a new bag. So this is something that I learned merely because of the fact that I ordered a couple of books on the internet through eBay. You take a piece of tape and you take one end and you fold it inward onto the sticky side so it creates a little hook. There's no sticky substance on the fold. So when you put it on the comic board and you want to take it out, just go find the little hook and pull it right up. It doesn't do any damage to the bag at all. You just have to be a little bit careful when you take the comic book out or put it back in, because if that tape snags the book, you got to really be careful to pull that tape off. Otherwise, you might rip your book. But those are the things that I learned in regards to keeping my comics in very good condition. Now, Andy, I'm pretty sure that your father has done a great deal of know-how in regards to collecting. Does he use these methods, or does he actually store his comics in a completely different kind of space?
So a lot of things very similar to what you were just saying, Steve. It depends on the book. A lot of the older stuff is in Mylar. A lot of them are more vacuum sealed in ways that it would be harder to open them. But nevertheless, I think for the kind of collection that I have, which is not as sizable as yours, but I do a lot of the same methods. I have, a single row comic book box, and, seeing some of the things that you had done, I made sure I was doing the same. I really like the little hook method and flipping them around. But that's about what I have to say for comics. I would take the opportunity, while talking about keeping things in good shape, since I was just talking about cards, wanted to mention some of the things that I do to keep the cards in good shape. Obviously, I just held up a little binder there, which is how I have everything. All of those cards in the binder are also in individual sleeves. And when I am playing a game of Magic, I double sleeve my cards. So if you have anything of value, that's a really good idea. Multiple distributors have different card sleeve sizes. So you can have like the tight fit and then a larger fit, which is like your standard playing card sleeve. I use, for the inner smaller sleeve, I used KMC Perfect Fit, which I have a packet of. I wasn't even prepared for this, but this is my life. So this was a couple feet away from me just now, so I grabbed this. So I really like KMC Perfect Fit. Dragon Shield makes a really, really good perfect slit. And then for the outer sleeve, I really like Ultra Pro Eclipse. I think those feel really good when you shuffle them. And also, I mentioned Dragon Shield. Dragon Shield Matte is also really, really nice. So I figured that was a good thing for me to add for the quality control stuff.
Right. I gotta really hear what Shay and April have to say in regards to preserving things like regular books as well as manga, because especially when you're dealing with books, you deal from everything from spines to dust jackets. Because even the dust jackets are the things you want to make sure stay in good condition. I mean, believe me, when I see the little bends in my Harry Potter books, I get really upset.
It doesn't matter to me. I will state
Okay.
here that I do nothing. I am the oddball. I use, I abuse. It shows love. And that's what I got. I generally, I don't think about it. It goes up on a shelf, and every once in a while I think about reading it, and I read it and I use it, and I have to constantly replace my coloring stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm not I'm not a collector for preserving purposes, mainly because I do it for enjoyment, and not to say that you can't do both at the same time. It's just it's one of those things that I'm weird. I like breaking spines because it shows that, like I said, I've loved it.
Mhm.
So for me, I kind of like April. I don't mind if my stuff's a little well used and worn. I mean, I've got like an older worn book, like it's coming up on the edges a little bit. This one's in pretty good condition compared to some of my other used ones that I have. But when it comes to manga, a lot of people are really finicky about their coloring on the edges. So this one is a very bright white. And so the biggest thing with manga that people worry about is yellowing. So to prevent that, some people will bag their manga so they don't have to deal with the UV stuff, or they store it away from a window in a darker room. That's another way to deal with that. And a lot of people worry about cracking spines. This one is still intact, and I've read it 3 times. So it just depends on how hard you are on your stuff.
That's very
Like,
true.
that's really what it comes down to with books and manga, is how hard you are on it. I don't mind a little bit of yellowing. I've bought used volumes that are like covered in library stickers. Do I care? No. All I care about is the content inside. If the content inside is still intact, I don't mind. So that's just a personal way of feeling about it. I don't bag my stuff. I have mine in my loft, in my upstairs of my house. So it does get warm, but I live in a very dry climate, so I don't have to worry about humidity. Humidity is another thing people worry about because that will warp the books a little bit. So it's all personal preference, really. I do also collect a lot digitally because I'm just running out of room. Like, I have a significant library, probably close to what April has behind you, maybe a little bit more in my area, and it's basically full of half books, half manga. And I'm just running out of room. So I have to prioritize. I do regularly cull my collection. If I don't think I'm going to read it again, it does not stay on my shelf because I have to keep things I would want to revisit.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually say this the first time, but I guess I'll elaborate a little bit more because you guys are mentioning a whole bunch of things. You know, when it comes to a really valuable comic, like one of the comics that I own is the very first Spider-Man issue that Todd McFarlane, who is known for Spawn, you know, one of the most well-known comic writers and artists of our time, his very first issue that he ever drew, which was Amazing Spider-Man issue 298. I double bagged and boarded it just to keep it extra safe. Same with my Scott Snyder New 52 Batman #1, very valuable comic. So that's basically what I do with some of those things. But yes, climate is very important in regards to where you keep those types of things. Yellowing is something that, you know, I bought a lot of back issues from the 1980s and 90s, and that's one of the few things that no matter how far back you go, you're never going to truly be able to find a truly great near mint, possibly mint condition book from that time, because it was a different time. These comics were made on newsprint paper. So yes, you're going to get a lot of yellowing. You're going to not see like real sharp edges of these old books, but that's because of the fact that, you need to know that they're old. They are over 30 years old, and that's just the way these books are going to be. But if they still are in relatively decent shape, then that's great. Just keep them as best as you possibly can. But I also realize that there are some people that actually put cedar around their comic boxes to prevent bugs from getting into their books. Also, silica gel packs, some people have started putting them in their boxes. I do that too because it helps absorb moisture. But yeah, I keep my comic books in my basement, which is fully finished. They say keeping them in places like attics or unfinished basements, not necessarily a good thing. Don't keep them near a heat source because it could warp the books. Don't leave it in a room that is constantly changing in temperature. So that's what I do. There is this big walk-in closet where all my collections are, and that's where all my comic books are. It's a perfectly climate controlled location in my house, and I'm glad that that's a good thing. But yes, room is also something that's important. I don't think I'm ever going to start reading things digitally, only because of the fact that I feel that for me, it just takes away from the whole concept of collecting. But what I'm a little bit nervous about is, yes, because I am running around out of room, I have to start thinking about stacking the boxes. And I do get a little bit nervous about stacking the boxes because I'm afraid that one of them is going to sink into the other and destroy all the books. But Daniel, he has tons of boxes stacked, and he says it's really no big deal. There's no reason why you shouldn't do it. So I may have to start resorting to that. Cammie?
So I am the collector that you all hate and fear. Tell you why. I have never been clinically diagnosed, but I am 110% positive. I am obsessive compulsive. I am extremely meticulous, and I have had this problem since I was extremely young. I'm going to share two stories with you before I give my tips and tricks. One, April reminded me because she said she very much loves her collection. She touches everything. She breaks spines. I had purchased a book for my mafia collection. I'm obsessed with the Italian mafia. And I was very excited to share it with my mother because that was one of the things that she also introduced me to and got me interested in. So I purchased a very large book called The Five Families. And I was so excited to share the history with her that I immediately bought it and took it over to the house so she could read it. About a month goes by and I hadn't heard anything from her. So I call her and I'm like, hey, did you ever end up reading that book? She's like, no, Cammie, I haven't even touched the book. And I'm like, why not? I dropped it off so you could read it first. She's like, Cammie, it's a hardback book. I know how you are with your hardback books. If I damage it, if I rip the dust jacket, if I mark a page, if God forbid I should have a Cheeto while I read your damn book. If I do anything to this, you are going to have my head on a platter. I can't read your damn book, Cammie. You might as well just come and pick it up because I'm never going to read it. I'm afraid to read it. Another example, I was 16 years old. My sister, who is 8 years younger than me, comes into my room while I'm at school, borrows a CD. I had a really interesting, very 90s CD thing where you stuck them in like plastic. They kind of stuck on top of each other. They looked like they were floating in air. She borrowed it. All of my CDs were in alphabetical order by genre. She borrows it, brings it back, and it's slightly askew. I'm like, who is in my room today? And my mom's like, what the hell are you yammering about? I was like, somebody was in my room today and borrowed my CD. How the hell would you even know that? I'm like, because it wasn't put back properly. The corner is not perfectly aligned with the rest of the CDs. So my sister comes in, she's like, you are so weird. I'm never borrowing a CD from you again. That's just stupid. And she walks out of my room. But did she borrow a CD again? No, she didn't. So I won. Point for me. But because I collect so many things, I mean, I would have literally tips for everything. I have tried to become a little bit less crazy because that's literally what I am, is crazy. In terms of how I handle my things, how I let people touch them and enjoy them. I had a friend come and visit me about a month ago, and she comes in and she immediately picks up my soda figures and she's looking at them. And then she turns to me and she's like, oh, I didn't even bother to ask you. She's like, this is probably really like tripping your anxiety. I was like, you have no idea right now. Finger oils, finger oils.
Oh God.
I don't know where your heads have been, you know? So I'm crazy. I really am. But, you know, a lot of the things that I have in terms of my Disney collection are ceramics. So like if you're a collector of snow globes, I would tell you, I've learned the hard way, don't store them in hot conditions because the water will fall and you'll lose the coloring on the inside if you don't keep it. So temperature control is very important. If you keep things out like this, dusting regularly is very important. Lighting is very important. Both natural and artificial light can discolor your items. Anything too hot or extremely cold can change even the shape. If you've ever melted a Funko Pop, I live in the Hellmouth, and so the delivery driver who has heard my wrath left it on my front stoop in the hot sun, and the hand of the Funko Pop like fell, and I'm like, do you understand what 120 degrees did to Ariel the mermaid today, sir? I don't think you do. So nonetheless, he knows if it's hot, please put my box under the tree. Thank you. Have a great day. You know, so I realize I am a crackpot and people don't want to borrow or touch my things because of this. But a lot of my stuff is in great condition because of that crazy mentality. In terms of books, that's another thing that I really kind of had to come off my high horse because a lot of the horror books are vintage. So this is a great example. I bought this because I do have a first edition. Stephen King is my absolute grail of horror collecting. I want to collect all of his books in hardcover first editions. That's an expensive hobby. So that said, I don't want to touch them. I don't want anybody to touch them or borrow them or even look at them. Don't sneeze in that direction, please. They're actually all behind glass. But I'll now buy these paperback books, and I'm less inclined to worry about things like this cracked, ripped spine that you guys can see here because I can touch it. Now, ask me if I will read it the same. Absolutely. I will open it like this, even though the spine is cracked, and I will read it at an angle so I don't further damage the book for the next person. But it does hurt my soul when like bookstores will stamp things like this, and if I'm reading a hardback book, I will take the dust jacket off immediately. I don't eat, I don't drink when I'm reading. I'm weird, and I don't have a lot of physical comic books for that reason, but I did want to share just a couple that I had because obviously this goes with my Alice collection. So I'm just, you know, very careful with this. This is a vintage copy from the 1950s. And then my favorite band of all time, believe it or not, they have a comic book. This is a Motley Crue comic book. I love this thing so much. But yeah, there's just all kinds of little, I mean, no matter what you collect, whatever it is, I'm sure I have a tip or a trick for you. So if you want to know specifically, ask me. But you might think that my responses are a little bit wackadoo because I'm a little bit wackadoo. And I'm okay to admit that now. I've said it in therapy. I'm fine with it. I am who I am.
Well, you do you, wackadoo.
Yeah, I am so sorry, Cammie, that I am probably your worst nightmare with how I handle things, especially since a lot of times I will completely tear apart a book just for some kind of project or some kind of like art thing. But
yeah,
I will
I regularly shred books that I don't care about anymore. So I'm sorry.
I will admit, though I am abusive to my collection, there is an organization that I have to have. I've got everything methodically in a place for a specific reason, and it might not be to protect it, even though some of the things, like if you get like dual-ended markers or things like that, you should always lay them on their side so that the ink is evenly distributed. I am like, if you use any of those, you have to put it back exactly where it was because I want to use it for as long as I possibly can.
And if you mess up the rainbow, you're in trouble.
This is very true too.
Yeah, I have definitely been a little bit anal in a couple of areas. Like one of the few things that I definitely, when it comes to comic books, it's like if I get a spine tick, I'm going to be fine. If there's a blunt edge, I'll be fine. But if there is a torn page when it comes to a comic that I bought, or one of the things that I didn't know why it was happening, apparently it was a DC book thing in recent years. Andy knows this. I told him about this. Some of my DC comic books, the center pages were coming out of the staples. And it was because of the fact that apparently DC was making much more weighted paper in regards to their comic books now, but they weren't getting strong enough staples for these books. So a lot of center pages were tearing out of the center of the book. So of course, I'd have to go buy another one because that's something I just do not like at all. And I will actually let Cami in on a fun fact that is probably going to make her jaw hit the floor. I have a broken Funko Pop, but because of the fact that it's actually in a box,
my soul.
okay, my Hot Topic exclusive X-Men Rogue, her head comes right off. Like there's a cracked piece on the very, very top. But the funny thing is, you could put the bobblehead right back on and it will look like it has no issue. And because of the fact that I keep it in a box, I say to myself, maybe I really don't need to get another one. I mean, does it hurt me a little bit? Yeah, it kind of does, but it's like, it's in a box. So unless I take it out of the box.
That's the kind of stuff, Steve, that keeps me up at night. Literally, I have had sleepless nights because I do something like that. And I know for a fact, I'm methodically thinking, can I replace it? Is it affordable? Is it still available? Is it vaulted? Did I touch it? Did I break it? And my husband will be like, oh my God, what is going on in your head right now? Go to bed. And I'm like, but it's a Funko Pop. He's like, exactly, it's a Funko Pop. Nobody cares. Good night.
Yeah, we unfortunately had a small accident. Two of the pops that I got my wife, when she was living in her studio apartment, they were doing some construction on the top floor and some of those boxes got water damage. The pops are fine though, especially considering the fact that one of them was the Hot Topic exclusive of Sad Stitch blocked. So she loves it, but the pop
flocked one that got wet.
But again, the pops are fine. It's the boxes that are a little bit wrinkled. And she was a little upset.
I tell you though, I have learned in the land of Funko, Steve, there is actually a thing now that you can, they part them out. So people have gotten into the business of taking broken Funko Pops and selling the parts so you can fix them yourself or hire someone to fix them for you. And they also sell boxes because you have a lot of OOB collectors or out of box collectors, and they will sell the boxes. Now you don't always get the plastic insert, that's the downside, but if her plastic insert is fine, I'm pretty sure someone out there has a box for sale. So just something to keep in the back of your mind if you ever wanted to look for a replacement box.
Well, she doesn't really seem to care about the boxes. We were both just concerned that Sitting Sad Stitch and Sorcerer Mickey, the original Sorcerer Mickey, were in very good condition, and the pops are actually just fine. So we have no issue. But yeah, I mean, do I want to replace my Rogue? The funny thing is, not really, because again, it's like she sits in the box. So you'd never guess.
Steve, I want to replace your Rogue. That's what's going on right now for me.
Well, you are more than welcome to, and you know that I will appreciate you as a friend for it. It's the Hot Topic exclusive Flying Rogue, just in case you were curious as to which Rogue it was. But yeah, when it comes to the boxes, I don't care if there's a blunt edge on a box or if there's a crease on the box. I'm just concerned about the pop inside the box. But I do know that Entertainment Earth has a great mint guarantee. So if you get your box and it comes out completely damaged, they'll replace the box. Funny you said about people who do not collect in box. I remember once when I got the Lord of the Rings Sauron pop, and it was old at the time. I was amazed that I was still able to get it for its regular price at Amazon.com, but the box was torn beyond repair. Like, it was a bad box. And one of my YouTuber friends, I talked about how the box was in really bad shape, and she reaches out to me. She goes, you know, I collect out a box. I have the box if you want it. So she mailed me the box. So now I have a nice box that Sauron is sitting in, and I'm like, how long have I been asleep? What year is this? What have people who are nerdy have actually been kind to each other? This is like the most amazing thing in the world. But anyway, we've been having an amazing conversation, but at some point in time, we do have to let this come to an end. I was thinking about allowing us to show off our prized possessions and talk about our grails, but you know something? That's not necessarily something that everyone needs to know now. That may be just something that we can all discuss as friends. But what I would like to ask everybody is final advice for people who are new to the collection game. How do you shop smart? Here's what I've learned, especially in the comic book market, because right now, back issues are in demand. Comic books, you know, they're selling, but when it comes to old books, oh my God, do people want them? FOMO is in my vocabulary now. So it's like if I see a comic book on eBay that I want to add to my collection and it's for a good price, do not wait, because there's a very good chance in this market that it's going to be gone. That's why I always tell Andy that my original floppy collections of Hush and of the Long Halloween, for the prices that I paid, they were a steal in the market today. So my God, am I happy that I have them. But here's the best way to shop for back issues of comic books, or just books in general. Always look for really good sellers. If they are below 99.9% in terms of their positive rating, do not buy from them unless you see a comic that nobody else of that rating is selling, and that person may be like a 97 or a 96. See what they write in the description. If there is a full description of this product, then there's a very good chance that that seller is legit, because I've been scammed. Thank God eBay got me my money back. And it's really, really upsetting when that happens. So you really want to look and you want to ask questions. But what I'm getting at is those really good sellers, because it's not just individual people. There are retailers that have digital stores on eBay. Browse their inventory, because you could probably find a large portion of your back issues or even your new comic books. And if you can get like a 10 or 20 bulk order of comic books from one seller, you are going to save money on shipping because you're buying from one retailer. Or if you can't buy from one retailer, find 2 or 3 and mix and match. Also, feel free to spend a little extra time. Get a list of comics that you want. Take a look at your 3 favorite sellers. See if they're all selling it. And if they are, put them all in your shopping cart, see what the price is, and price them. Yes, it's tedious. Yes, it's time consuming. But if you really want to be collecting, if you are really passionate about this, you've really got to dedicate time in order to make sure that you can afford it. Never get into something that you don't think that you're going to afford. I mean, do I go over my head sometimes? Of course I do. But one of the few things that makes me very excited is the fact that I always know that there's another paycheck coming. However, I always have to keep that in the back of my mind, which is why I work as hard as I do, because I want to keep this job. I love this job. So always watch, budget if you have to, but really look for sellers that know what they're selling. Try and become accustomed, ask them questions, and even be willing to strike up some relationships. And more importantly, really try to create a positive impression at your local comic book store. Really try to get to know your managers and befriend them, because I will tell you, and Andy's met him too, the guy who runs our local comic book store, he looks out for me because he knows that I'm giving him business. That's number one. But at the same time, I'm always promoting the place. I mean, I got my friend Andy over here to purchase books from these guys. Daniel's purchasing from this guy. So every now and again, he'll actually let me in on what's the new big thing coming. He's like, do you want a copy of this put on hold for you? They look out for you because yes, they want your business, but at the same time, they see your passion because pretty much everyone that mans a comic book store or is in a bookshop, they're just as passionate about these things as you are. So do that as well. And quite frankly, I think that that is the best that you're going to be able to do in terms of collecting. And Cami, you know some of those methods, especially in regards to things like Funko Pops. I mean, some of the stories that you've told me in regards to retailers that you've worked with, like you've really walked away with some very positive stories just because you're the type of person that you are, and because of the fact that you're very passionate about these things. They see that they want you to be satisfied.
And I think that's important that you put that in the forefront, because if someone knows that you're passionate but you're also knowledgeable at the same time, they're not going to take advantage of your passion, because people will do that quite a lot. Oh, well, they like this, so if I already know they like it, they're going to pay whatever I want for it. So my first and foremost, most important advice is do your homework. Know your sources, whether that's going to someone in person, whether that's, you know, if you're an eBay buyer, if you like to buy on Amazon. Everyone is a person behind that keyboard, so you have to keep those lines of communication open. I also, because I'm going to kind of focus more on Funko Pops because that's where I've been mostly lately, there are a ton of fakes out there, so make sure that you're asking for multiple pictures. You want to see the full box, you want to see the bottom of the box. If someone is a little bit iffy about sending you pictures, chances are they either don't have it in their possession or it is in fact a fake. Another thing that makes me very leery with today's world is that a lot of people are extremely trustworthy right off the bat. So you have a lot of people who want to sell these things on Instagram and Facebook, whether they have a page or not. You know, maybe they're just part of a group. Those people can scam you too. So be very careful, especially when it comes to grails. I think a lot of people get really excited because they're like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this for so long and you have it and it's the right price. Also, again, beware, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. That's always been the test of time, you know. And don't get me wrong, there's some good deals out there. There's someone that maybe fell on hard times and just needs $100, so they're going to sell you a $200 pop for $50 because they need to put, you know, food on the table that week for their family. There's a lot of situations where you can still grab a good deal, but make sure that you're not going with your first source. You know, a lot of people want to just say, oh, well, this person says this is where they got it, so I'm going to gravitate here. For example, today, as a matter of fact, I went and looked on eBay and I saw a lot of what I thought were fairly decent prices for a Loungefly item that I was looking for. But then I found out that the same item was still available through Box Lunch and it was $25 cheaper. So sometimes your retailers will still have stuff. And with Funko, I'm noticing a lot lately, they're bringing back a lot of the old school. Although the box obviously will have a later date, so you're not going to have the full, you know, maybe the vintage grail that you're looking for, you're still going to get the same pop, you know. So if you're just looking to complete a collection or you're looking to fill a shelf or something, that will suffice. But, you know, I do realize that there are people that would rather have the OG than whatever's being reproduced or mass produced. So, you know, just be very careful. And if you know someone, like you said, Steve, the line of communication is important. If you know someone that you know, regularly talk to, or maybe you're part of like an Instagram community or a YouTube community, ask the person, what do you think about this? Can you check it out? Because I know you collect this too. And, you know, every penny counts, especially when you're a collector. So just don't get scammed, because that's the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah. April?
I think for me, I mean, get to know your used bookstore owners, because they're really, really good at keeping an eye out for something for you if there's like a specific thing that you're trying to pick up. Like when I'm always looking for maybe a different Grimm's edition that comes in, and I'm not very biased against whatever, whenever I'm looking for something like that, they'll let me know. I also like to hit up a lot of like library book sales and things like that, but that's also because I mean, I want to read it, and it's not necessarily always about the condition, and I'm willing to do some cleanup of those books and things like that, like getting the library stickers off and those ridiculously shiny plastic covers that I really, really dislike. But my biggest thing is if there is a author or an artist or someone you really like their work of, follow them on social media, because a lot of times they're going to promote sales, they're going to promote deals, they're going to promote pre-orders that'll in turn help them,
And
but it'll also
giveaways.
help. Yeah, they'll help you get a really cool edition that you wouldn't have known about otherwise, or you wouldn't have gotten as good of a deal because you were in the know that it was coming out.
Mhm.
Shay, how about you?
I always the biggest thing I tell people when it comes to manga, especially, don't start with something long, don't start with something out of print, and never go into debt for your collection. Those are always my first 3 tips. It is not worth racking up a credit card, thousands of dollars worth of manga, because you might not end up liking it. Like, I encourage people to always, like, if they're unsure about a series before they go and spend their money on it, see if you can check it out from the library or borrow it from a friend. There are several series that I have fallen in love with that are coming out in collector's editions right now because they are older titles. Usually Clamp titles, Chobits, Clover, Magic Knight Rayearth. They're coming out with these beautiful collector's editions right now. But I wasn't sure I was going to like them, so I didn't want to spend all this money on these collector's editions if I didn't know I was going to like the story. My friend had the older copies, and I just borrowed them from her before investing my money in these collector's editions. So that's another thing. If you've got somebody nearby that you can borrow things from because you're not 100% sure if you want to spend your hard-earned money on it, then borrow it before you buy, because then you know that you truly want it for your collection. And don't get caught up in the hype. That's just something that we talk about in BookTube all the time too. Is when you first start BookTube, you buy books just to have for a haul, or just because everybody else is reading it, even though it might not be your taste. You just have to go slow when it comes to collecting manga. My massive collection that is not behind me today, it usually is when I'm recording these, but it took me almost 6 years to have the collection that I do. And I'm a full grown working adult without children. And I have a husband, and his income takes care of most of our big bills for our house. So I have flexible income to invest more money than most people. So do not look at my growth of a collection as your benchmark, because it shouldn't be. You need to do what's reasonable for you. And anytime you can find a sale or a coupon, obviously do those things. WriteStuffAnime.com is on the regular, the lowest prices for manga. They regularly are retailing at 25% less. They have a deal with the publishers where they get to sell for 25% less than the average retailer. So if you're just starting out, or there's a series you know you want to get a lot of at a time, Right Stuff is definitely where you want to go. They do sales at least quarterly where you're getting them even at a deeper discount. So watch for the sales and just take your time. Don't rush your collection, because you might feel all in the moment about something right now, but then 3 months later, you don't have the same love for it, and you might not want it in your collection. So just take your time. Like, collecting isn't a hurry. Like, you shouldn't be rushing to collect it if you can help it, especially when you're first starting out, because you're still learning your taste. And there are series that I bought early on that I loved at the time, but now that I've been reading a lot longer, it's like, I really don't want this anymore. And I've culled those from my collection. So just give yourself the time and the flexibility to do so. Libraries and friends are great references. And there's also a lot of places where you can read it digitally for very little money. Kodansha Comics has a lot of their manga available on their Kindle Unlimited platform. So if you're doing that for your books already, check out their manga selection. They have some great titles over there. Shonen Jump has their app where you're paying $2 a month and you can read up to 100 chapters a day on that app. Like, it's a steal. I mean, I read almost all of Haikyuu in 3 days on that app, and it's a lot of chapters. There's like 400 chapters in that series. So you can do a lot of reading for very little money. So look at those avenues first, especially when you're first starting out, because, and you know, if you know you like certain things, go ahead and spend your money on it and bring it into your home. But if you're unsure about anything, try something where you're spending very little money or no money at all before you bring it into your home, because you don't want to have buyer's remorse later.
Andy, take us home.
And what Shay just said, I think, is a really key point, because what I was thinking I really wanted to say is that make sure when you're buying something for your collection, I mean, the things that I buy, I get them because I love them, they're meaningful to me, they have value to me. I would recommend that before jumping on something because of the hype, because it's a hot item, because it's something that you think you're getting a good deal on, really think if it's something that you want to own and has value to you. And then on the flip side of that, if you're careful about those things and you try to put priority onto things that you value like that, think really carefully before you sell things too. I mean, right now there's a ton of hype around Pokemon cards.
Oh yeah.
Grading is on back order. It's kind of insane. And everybody is trying to flip their collections. I'm really lucky because of who my dad was that I have never sold collectibles from when I was a kid. He was like, no, Andy, it'll be worth something someday. And with the Pokemon cards, he's incredibly right. But I'm also not selling any of them right now because I don't think this bubble is the thing. Anyway, that's just one example of be sure that what you're collecting is stuff that you actually like. And on that same note, don't sell something that you're going to regret having sold. Don't sell something just because you think it's a great moment to do so. If you have it for the right reasons in the first place, might not be the best thing to do. And that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, because one of the few things that I completely forgot to mention, I think that this is something that really applies to all of us that we can all agree on, is you've just got to do your research and don't buy it if you don't really think you want it. Because, you know, right now the comic book market is such a weird place because it feels like it's the 1990s, because everybody feels that everything is going to be worth something. But for me, it's like, am I buying a lot of comic books right now? Yes, I'm buying a lot of comics, especially back issues, because I feel that if I don't get them while they're cheap in this market, I'm never going to be able to get them, and I don't want to pay through the nose. Funko Pops is the same thing with me. It's like, I look at the new lines that come out and I say to myself, is this something that I can truly find value in? Because when someone looks at my collection and someone says, oh my God, this is a huge collection, I laugh, because I know that my collection compared to most hardcore Funko collectors is tiny. And no, Cammie, I am not pointing my finger at you. But when it comes to comic books, there are so many websites out there that you can find out about a new comic book series that's coming out, and you can read it. You won't get spoiled. You'll see if the writer is good. You'll see if the artist is good. But then more importantly, you'll say to yourself, is this story going to be something that I'm truly going to enjoy? Because one of the big things that just got dropped earlier this week was Marvel is killing off Doctor Strange in September. And I know, because right before the new Doctor Strange movie comes out, oh my God, everyone's going to want to get their hands on it. But you want to know something? That book could suck. I actually might be interested in it because Jed MacKay is writing it. And Jed MacKay has written some of my favorite and most fun recent reads. He's currently writing Magic the Gathering, the comic book series, and he is doing a great job. So is this something that I'll be interested in? I'm still not sure. It's also because of the fact that I'm not even a big Doctor Strange fan, to be honest with you. So I may skip it. And will I be upset if I find out that this book is going to be worth hundreds of dollars? I'm like, maybe for 5 minutes, because I have a feeling that this comic bubble is going to burst, and everybody that's been snagging every comic that they can get their hands on, or every Funko Pop that they're trying to get their hands on, it's all going to correct itself, just like all markets do. But seriously, don't buy everything you see, especially if you're unsure if you want it or not. There's so many places where you can research, and that's it.
I just want to piggyback off kind of what you and Shay are saying right now, in terms of collecting though, because I have been collecting so long. I mean, really, if I look at the timeline, I've been collecting for about 28, 29 years. So I think that's very important that Shay said that, because I think a lot of the times there's a misconception when people see your videos that you have a background like, oh my God, look at all that stuff. They must have gotten it in a year or 6 months. No, honey, this is 30 years of collecting. So ask before you assume. And I know that the topic of materialism comes up quite frequently in the booktube community because people like the aesthetic of having bookshelves behind them. Again, I have over 5,000 books in my collection, but you're not going to see them all because they're sporadically placed throughout my home because I love books. I love literature. I think books are a staple in every room. That said, as the collector, I think it's important to know, don't buy everything that you see because it's part of a collection. For example, if something is hot, we'll just go with something that Andy just said, Pokemon. Pokemon is everywhere. Pokemon has been around obviously for 25 years. I remember when it came to fruition, I thought I was too old for it. I didn't get it. However, not everything that's made with the Pokemon wording or the Pokemon brand is genuine. And so a lot of the value of toys and cards and things are all about the manufacturer and where they're made and how they're made, the quality, the quantity that's put out there. I have, things in my collection that are mass produced that obviously are everywhere. They're not going to be worth anything until 30, 40, 50 years down the road when people have, sold them, thrown them away, broken them, that kind of a thing. But if I invest in something that say is like one of 500, then obviously the value is there. So I'm more inclined to pay a little bit more upfront for it. So again, there's so many avenues of collecting. This is just kind of the surface, what we're all talking about in terms of collecting, because we all collect such different things. But I think that a lot of the time people do buy into these hypes and they fall into the videos that they're consumed with on social media and think that they have to have it, or they have to have something that looks similar to somebody else's background. I think the most important element of collecting is the uniqueness to you as the individual. Whether you have one thing that you love so much and that's all you get, or if you have 100 different fandoms, it's you, it's an expression of yourself. And Steve said that from the very start of this conversation, is collecting is a reflection of the person. So don't try to visualize who you are through somebody else's collection, because then you're going to end up with a lot of things that you were going to regret buying, and a lot of things you might not be able to offload because they really weren't worth anything to begin with. I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay, one last quick thing. It's something my mom taught me. It's about buying anything. If you don't love it, don't buy it. It's that simple, guys. Like, if you don't love it, don't buy it. Because if you're unsure at all, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have buyer's remorse if you're going into it unsure. Like, it's very rare that you end up truly loving something when you're on the fence about it. So use like first impression reviews and stuff as kind of a benchmark of somebody that you trust. Like, I have a lot of people come to me. I have this series I do on my channel called Try 3, where I try the first 3 volumes of a manga series, and I let you know whether I'm going to continue it or not, the pros, the cons, what's going on in the story, so that you can kind of determine from there where you're at with it. And some of them, it's like, I don't think I'm going to physically collect this one anymore. I think I'm going to switch to a digital because I'm unsure, and things like that. So it's all about finding people you trust to help you benchmark whether you're going to like or love something, or just reading it before and only buying the things you love, because your
And
collection should be just what Cami said, a reflection of you.
and
So
yeah.
yeah.
And if you start collecting something and it ends up not being everything you wanted it to be, don't be ashamed about just cutting yourself off. Never be ashamed of that, because it's just not your thing. You gave it a shot. You can hold on to the books or the comics if you want to, just because for the sake of having them. But if it's not your cup of tea, be at least happy that you gave it a try and you can recommend it to somebody else. But anyway, everyone, that is going to wrap up our pilot launch for That's Comical. What are you going to find on this channel besides these amazing people? Well, you're going to find everything that you could possibly imagine that is comic book, manga, film, video game, collecting, everything that is part of this specific niche market, or markets, if you will. You're going to find so many interesting interpretations and opinions on it, and we are just hoping that you will all join us. I promise you these future episodes will be a lot shorter, but this was a true celebration, and we had so much to talk about. But I want to thank every one of the That's Comical team that joined us this evening. Thank you for being a part of this amazing launch, and we're hoping that each and every one of you will enjoy our future episodes. So please don't forget to like this video and leave us a comment, especially if you're watching this in real time. We would love to talk to you. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you are up to date with all of our latest content. And on behalf of the That's Comical staff, I want to say thank you all, and we hope you enjoy whatever it is that you are reading now or what you plan on reading in the future. Have a great one, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.